Emma Rivers sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her hands resting on her swollen belly, trembling slightly as the harsh fluorescent lights reflected off the sterile walls. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the soft murmur of nurses in the corridor did little to calm the storm raging inside her. Her mind kept replaying the scene from just a few hours ago. Derek's sharp words, his impatient glance at his watch, and the cold dismissal before he stormed out, leaving her alone in the sterile hospital room. She could still feel the echo of betrayal, each step he had taken away from her a reminder that the man she trusted most had abandoned her at one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. Tears blurred her vision as she gripped the hospital sheets, curling slightly inward as if to shield herself and the life growing inside her. The physical discomfort of pregnancy, the weight, the aches, the frequent waves of nausea, was amplified by the emotional pain of rejection and solitude. Every passing minute felt longer than the last, each one a cruel reminder that Derek's absence was not just physical but emotional, leaving her to face the anxiety of impending labor alone. Emma's thoughts swirled between fear and anger. What if something went wrong? What if she went into labor and he wasn't there to protect, support, or even acknowledge her struggles? Each imagined scenario tightened the knot of dread in her chest. She drew a shaky breath, forcing herself to focus on her baby, silently willing strength into both of them. Yet the sting of Derek's betrayal lingered, sharp and unforgiving, as she realized that the man she had loved and trusted had left her to endure the most critical moments of her life entirely on her own. The stark loneliness of the hospital room was now a battlefield of courage, fear, and heartbreak, and Emma knew she would need every ounce of her inner strength to survive the hours ahead. Before the chaos of the hospital room, Emma Rivers had lived a life carefully balanced between personal ambition and devotion to family. Gentle, intelligent, and deeply empathetic, she had always placed the needs of others, her friends, her family, and now the life growing inside her, above her own. She had envisioned a marriage filled with laughter, shared dreams, and unwavering support, imagining late-night conversations about baby names, weekend walks through leafy parks, and quiet dinners where they celebrated small victories together. Her love for Derek had been patient and unwavering, a steady current even when she sensed subtle shifts in his attention. Derek Rivers, in contrast, had always presented a polished and charming exterior. Colleagues admired his drive, friends praised his charisma, and neighbors envied the seemingly perfect life he projected. On the surface, he appeared the devoted husband, attentive on occasion, affectionate at random, and generous in ways that impressed the people around him. Yet beneath the charm lay a man increasingly consumed by work, ambition, and self-interest. Long hours at the office turned into evenings at high-end networking events, leaving Emma to shoulder the emotional and physical weight of pregnancy largely on her own. His occasional compliments and fleeting moments of tenderness were insufficient to mask the growing cracks in their partnership. Emma had tried to reconcile her concerns with optimism, hoping the busy schedules and stress of modern life explained Derek's distance. She clung to the dream of a loving, supportive family, even when he neglected small gestures that once mattered. A missed doctor's appointment, forgotten prenatal class, or the way he barely listened when she voiced fears or hopes. Deep down, she feared that the man she adored might prioritize ambition over love, a realization that now made her recent heartbreak painfully inevitable. The stage was set for the emotional fallout that would later consume their lives. Emma's unwavering devotion contrasted sharply with Derek's hidden selfishness, establishing high stakes for the impending confrontation. She had invested her heart fully, trusting that love and patience could weather distance, while he had allowed ambition and desire to take precedence. The disparity between their commitments created the fragile fault lines that would soon fracture their marriage and transform what should have been joyful anticipation into isolation, betrayal, and crisis. Even before the hospital incident, the cracks in Emma and Derek Rivers' marriage had begun to widen, almost imperceptibly at first, but with increasing intensity. Small conflicts, once easily resolved with conversation or compromise, now escalated into silent standoffs or terse exchanges. Emma, attuned to the emotional rhythms of their relationship, noticed that Derek's attention had shifted elsewhere. His eyes often glazed over when she spoke, his mind drifting toward emails, calls, or meetings he claimed were urgent. Even simple interactions like discussing baby names or nursery plans were met with distractions or a half-hearted agreement, leaving Emma feeling unseen and unheard. Emma tried repeatedly to bridge the growing emotional gap. She approached Derek with gentle questions, hoping to understand his distant moods, to spark conversation and rekindle connection. "How was your meeting?" she would ask, smiling, only to receive a distracted grunt or a distracted nod. She suggested shared activities, prenatal yoga, weekend walks, or quiet dinners, but each invitation seemed to collide with his work priorities or unexplained commitments. Even when she voiced concerns about their growing distance, Derek's responses were dismissive, sometimes defensive, as if acknowledging her fears was an inconvenience rather than a responsibility. Subtle signs of his preoccupation extended beyond work. He became protective of his phone, often answering calls privately and leaving Emma with vague excuses. Invitations to social events or family gatherings were sometimes postponed indefinitely, with reasons that seemed plausible but lacked the warmth of genuine interest. Emma's attempts at intimacy, emotional, verbal, and physical, were met with detachment or avoidance, leaving her to navigate both the physical demands of pregnancy and the emotional void in their relationship alone. The strain wasn't marked by dramatic fights but by absence. Absence of attention, absence of empathy, absence of shared joy. Emma's patience and devotion remained steadfast, but the imbalance between her commitment and Derek's emotional withdrawal began to plant seeds of doubt and vulnerability. These patterns of neglect and avoidance created fertile ground for betrayal, making the eventual heartbreak almost inevitable. What should have been a partnership built on mutual care and respect was slowly eroding, leaving Emma increasingly exposed to disappointment, loneliness, and the devastating consequences of Derek's choices. Unbeknownst to Emma, Derek Rivers' charm and polished exterior masked a dangerous undercurrent of deceit. Behind the closed doors of his office, high-end restaurants, and late-night events, Derek had begun a secret life that threatened the very foundation of his marriage. He had become entangled with Vanessa Cross, a colleague whose ambition and allure drew him into a web of temptation he had convinced himself he deserved. Their encounters were carefully hidden, text messages deleted, calls made from private numbers, and meetings disguised as professional obligations. Derek rationalized his behavior as harmless excitement, a way to escape the monotony and pressure of work and family obligations, but the emotional and moral betrayal grew heavier with each secret rendezvous. Emma, perceptive and emotionally attuned, sensed subtle shifts in Derek's demeanor. He became more distracted, evasive, and guarded, often glancing at his phone with guilty urgency or abruptly leaving rooms without explanation. The occasional late-night work commitments now seemed suspiciously timed, and the warmth in his voice, once steady and comforting, had taken on a hollow, rehearsed quality. Emma's intuition tugged at her relentlessly, whispering that something was wrong, though concrete evidence remained frustratingly out of reach. Each unanswered question and unexplained absence intensified her anxiety, creating a sense of foreboding she couldn't shake. The tension between what Emma felt and what she could prove heightened her unease. She noticed the subtle indicators: lingering perfume not her own, hesitant glances when she approached his phone, vague answers about business trips or meetings. Derek's hidden life created a labyrinth of secrecy and deceit, keeping Emma suspended in a state of uncertainty, unable to confront him directly without risking confrontation or accusation that might be dismissed. This dual reality, Derek's calculated betrayal and Emma's growing suspicion, set the stage for inevitable conflict. The invisible divide between them widened, stretching the emotional fabric of their relationship to its breaking point. Emma's instincts told her something devastating was coming, yet the lack of proof left her isolated in her fear, trapped between trust, doubt, and the painful anticipation of betrayal that would soon upend everything she believed about love, loyalty, and safety. Emma Rivers sat on the stiff hospital bed, her back pressed against the crisp white sheets, feeling the weight of her swollen body and the crushing loneliness that now engulfed her. The fluorescent lights overhead felt harsh, each buzz and hum intensifying her anxiety. Derek had left hours ago after what seemed like a minor disagreement, but the impact of his absence was monumental. Every pang of discomfort, Every wave of nausea, every flutter of the baby within her womb seemed magnified by the stark realization that the person she trusted most had walked out when she needed him the most. Her hands trembled as she clutched the sides of the bed, nails digging into the fabric in a silent attempt to ground herself. The tears she had fought to hold back all day now streamed freely, soaking the hospital gown she wore. The heart monitor beeped steadily, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her and the responsibility she alone now felt. Nurses entered periodically to check vitals, offering sympathetic smiles, soft questions, and gentle reassurances, but Emma's emotional collapse was raw and uncontainable. Her vulnerability was evident, and whispers passed between the staff as they exchanged concerned glances, unsure whether to intervene directly or give her space. Each pang of betrayal pierced deeper than the physical discomfort of pregnancy. She felt exposed, humiliated in a way that transcended embarrassment. Her private despair had become almost public, witnessed by strangers who offered kindness but could not replace the presence of her husband. She imagined Derek elsewhere, oblivious to her suffering, perhaps rationalizing his departure as trivial, and the sting of neglect cut sharper than any contraction. As hours dragged on, Emma alternated between sobbing, curling into herself, and attempting shallow breaths to calm her racing heart. Every memory of their life together, the promises made, the plans for their child, collided violently with the present reality. She was alone, left to navigate fear, pain, and emotional abandonment. Amidst the sterile hospital walls and clinical routines, her despair was a quiet rebellion, a testament to both the depth of her love and the magnitude of Derek's betrayal. Each moment underscored her fragility, yet also foreshadowed the inner strength that would soon emerge, driven by the necessity to protect herself and the life she carried. Emma wiped the tears from her cheeks, taking a shaky breath as she reached for her phone. Her fingers trembled, not from weakness but from the urgency that coursed through her. She knew she could no longer rely on Derek to protect or care for her, and the growing fear for her unborn child demanded immediate action. With a sense of resolve, she dialed the number of Madeline Hayes, the lawyer she had trusted for years, someone who had always been a voice of reason and a fierce advocate for her clients. "Madeline, it's Emma," she said, her voice quivering at first but gradually steadying as she continued. I need your help. It's Derek. He left me here at the hospital. I'm alone and I don't know what to do. I'm scared for myself and the baby." Each word poured out like a flood, a mixture of desperation, fear, and determination. She explained the events leading up to the moment, the argument, Derek's abrupt departure, and the mounting signs of neglect and emotional abandonment. She voiced her concerns about his intentions, his recklessness, and the urgent need to protect both herself and the child from further harm. Madeline listened carefully, her tone calm but firm, immediately assessing the situation. "Emma, stay calm. First, ensure your safety and that of your baby. I want you to document everything. Texts, emails, any evidence of his behavior. I'll contact him directly, and we'll take immediate legal steps to secure your rights and protect you both." Her words were deliberate, instilling a sense of control and reassurance in Emma, who had felt powerless just moments ago. By the time the call ended, Emma felt a spark of relief amid her anxiety. Madeline had already begun devising a strategic plan, preparing legal measures to hold Derek accountable, protect her rights, and ensure the unborn child's safety. For the first time since Derek had walked out, Emma felt a glimmer of empowerment. Though fear still lingered, she realized she was no longer alone. With Madeline's guidance, she could assert control over the situation, transforming her vulnerability into proactive strength and preparing to confront the challenges ahead with courage and clarity. Madeline Hayes wasted no time once she hung up with Emma. She knew that in cases like this, speed and precision could make the difference between chaos and control. Settling into her office, she began meticulously reviewing Emma's account of the events, cross-referencing it with prior documentation and communications that highlighted Derek Rivers' pattern of neglect and irresponsibility. Every missed appointment, every text ignored, every moment of emotional abandonment became a crucial piece of evidence. She noted the hospital incident as the most egregious example, emphasizing not only emotional neglect but also the potential danger posed to both Emma and her unborn child. The first step was to formally notify Derek. Madeline drafted a stern, carefully worded letter, outlining the documented incidents and emphasizing the legal implications of neglecting the responsibilities owed to a pregnant spouse. She included warnings about potential charges related to endangerment, emotional abuse, and financial obligations, making it clear that any further reckless behavior could exacerbate his legal jeopardy. She also prepared documentation for restraining orders or protective measures, ensuring Emma's safety while reinforcing the seriousness of the situation. Beyond immediate protective actions, Madeline began assembling a long-term legal strategy. Custody provisions for the unborn child were analyzed, anticipating worst-case scenarios. Financial safeguards were considered, including access to shared accounts, property rights, and potential compensation for emotional distress. Every step was designed to create a shield around Emma, giving her not only security but leverage over Derek should he attempt manipulation or evasion. Meanwhile, Derek remained oblivious to the full extent of the legal storm brewing. Madeline's notifications and preliminary measures arrived like silent warnings, building tension as the weight of consequences slowly pressed upon him. His arrogance and belief that he could manipulate the situation gave way to unease as he began receiving formal communications and realizing that Emma was no longer defenseless. By the end of the day, Madeline had transformed Emma's vulnerability into a position of power. Each action, each carefully planned legal move, served to assert control and protect both Emma and her unborn child. Derek's sense of security was crumbling even before he fully understood the ramifications, and the stage was set for a confrontation in which the tables of power had irrevocably shifted. Emma's fear had been replaced with cautious empowerment, while Derek's ignorance was about to collide with consequences he could no longer ignore. Derek Rivers sat in his sleek downtown office, the city skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, yet nothing about the view could calm the storm raging in his mind. His phone vibrated relentlessly, calls from lawyers, formal notifications, and messages that carried a weight he could no longer ignore. Each notification brought another layer of panic, as Derek slowly began to comprehend the consequences of his reckless actions. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His abandonment of Emma at the hospital was no longer a private lapse. It had triggered a chain of legal and personal consequences that could dismantle the life he had carefully curated. As the hours passed, Derek's attempts to rationalize his behavior grew increasingly frantic. He told himself that leaving the hospital had been a momentary lapse, that Emma would forgive him, and that the matter could be quietly resolved. Yet with every call from Madeline Hayes, every legal notice, and every document he opened, the stark reality became undeniable. Protective measures, potential custody considerations, financial scrutiny, and the threat of public exposure all loomed over him like a storm cloud he could not escape. His mind raced as he tried to regain control. Could he charm his way out? Could he manipulate Emma or delay the legal process? Each option seemed inadequate, insufficient to halt the momentum Madeline had already set in motion. Panic gave way to a gnawing sense of helplessness, as he realized that the careful image he had maintained, successful, charming, untouchable, was crumbling under the weight of documented neglect and betrayal. Derek's ego, once a shield that allowed him to dismiss responsibility, now amplified his fear. He replayed every misstep, every ignored call, every dismissive word, and saw them all laid bare through the lens of potential legal action. The mounting pressure forced him into a state of mental paralysis, where anxiety collided with desperation, leaving him grasping for solutions that no longer existed. For the first time, he understood that Emma was no longer powerless, that the law was not abstract, and that the public and legal consequences of his behavior were now inevitable. The panic he felt was complete as the realization sank in. He had lost control, and the life he thought secure was teetering on the edge of irrevocable ruin. Madeline Hayes worked with relentless precision, leaving no detail unexamined as she built a comprehensive case to protect Emma Rivers and her unborn child. She began by collecting all available medical documentation, including hospital records from Emma's pregnancy, vital signs from the day Derek abandoned her, and notes from attending physicians and nurses who had observed her distress. Each piece reinforced the undeniable fact that Emma had been left in a vulnerable and potentially dangerous situation, creating a foundation that was both factual and compelling. Next, Madeleine reached out to witnesses who could corroborate Emma's account. Hospital staff provided statements detailing Emma's emotional and physical fragility during the incident, while friends and family shared observations of Derek's growing neglect and irresponsible behavior over the past months. Text messages, emails, and phone logs were meticulously archived, illustrating Derek's evasiveness, dismissive responses, and ongoing patterns of manipulation. Each communication highlighted a consistent disregard for Emma's safety and well-being, painting a clear picture of a husband whose charm masked a troubling lack of responsibility. Financial records were also scrutinized. Madeleine examined shared accounts, property holdings, and discretionary spending, identifying areas where Derek's behavior demonstrated not only selfishness but a willingness to prioritize his desires over family obligations. Behavioral evidence, missed appointments, unexplained absences, and patterns of avoidance, was documented and analyzed to illustrate a consistent pattern of neglect and irresponsibility. The meticulous preparation was a challenge to Derek's arrogance, which had blinded him to the growing legal and personal consequences of his actions. As Madeleine assembled the evidence, Derek remained largely unaware of the depth of scrutiny and strategic planning taking place. The contrast between his casual disregard and her methodical diligence highlighted her expertise and reinforced the inevitability of his accountability. By the time the case was ready, every angle had been anticipated, every loophole addressed, and every piece of evidence carefully documented. Madeleine had transformed Emma's vulnerability into power, crafting a strategy that was both legally airtight and emotionally compelling. Derek's confidence, built on assumption and deceit, now faced the reality of an opponent who would leave nothing to chance. The foundation was set for a confrontation that would expose his failures and shift control entirely into Emma's hands. Emma Rivers sat quietly in her apartment, the soft hum of the city outside her window a stark contrast to the turmoil that had engulfed her life. The hospital incident and Derek's betrayal had left deep emotional scars, but she could feel a transformation taking place within herself. Each step she had taken, from reaching out to Madeleine Hayes to documenting every detail of Derek's neglect, was an assertion of her own strength and agency. The fear that had once paralyzed her was gradually giving way to a steady determination to protect herself and her unborn child, a resolve born from necessity and nurtured by her growing independence. In quiet moments, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the nights spent waiting for Derek to return calls, the small disappointments piled atop one another until they became unbearable, and the realization that relying solely on him was no longer an option. Her maternal instincts had sharpened, guiding her decisions with clarity. The baby's safety and well-being had to come first. Every choice she made, from contacting her lawyer to arranging protective measures, was informed by this instinctive, unwavering focus. Her cooperation with Madeleine had become a source of empowerment. Emma provided meticulous records, detailed accounts, and honest reflections, contributing to a legal strategy that was as thorough as it was precise. She discovered a newfound confidence in her own voice, realizing that her perspective and testimony were not only valid but critical. She could advocate for herself, navigate complex legal processes, and make decisions that would safeguard the future of her family. Emma's courage was not born of recklessness or confrontation but of clarity and principle. The vulnerability she had felt at the hospital had transformed into a quiet, commanding strength. She could confront deception and manipulation with intelligence and composure, proving that resilience was not simply enduring hardship, but actively shaping the course of one's life in the face of adversity. By embracing both her independence and her maternal instincts, Emma became a symbol of unwavering determination, poised to reclaim control and ensure that justice and protection would prevail for herself and the child she carried. Derek Rivers was not accustomed to being denied, and the realization that Emma and Madeleine were not only resisting his influence but actively dismantling his control sent him into a spiral of desperation. His first attempts were subtle, carefully worded texts, apologetic phone calls, and feigned concern for Emma and the baby. He tried to charm her with reminders of past affection, gifts, and promises to change, hoping that sentimentality would override her growing resolve. But Emma, fortified by Madeline's guidance, recognized the manipulation for what it was, an attempt to regain power he had recklessly forfeited. When charm failed, Derek escalated his tactics. He attempted intimidation, sending veiled threats about financial instability, custody complications, and potential public embarrassment if she persisted in legal action. He hoped that fear would force compliance, that Emma would yield under pressure. Yet every message, every call, was met with calm, strategic responses from both Emma and Madeline. They documented his behavior meticulously, ensuring that each manipulative act strengthened their position rather than undermined it. Desperation soon led Derek to bribes, offers of money, favors, and concessions meant to silence Emma or sway her decisions. But the material temptations could not outweigh her determination to protect herself and her child. With each failed attempt, Derek's composure cracked further. His ego, once a shield, now exposed his vulnerability, highlighting the reversal of power in their relationship. By the time Derek realized the futility of his efforts, it was clear. The balance had shifted entirely. Emma's courage, combined with Madeline's expertise, had turned his tactics against him. The man who had thought he could manipulate and control now faced the consequences of his recklessness, and the tables were irrevocably turned. Power, once his to wield, was now firmly in Emma's hands. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation as Emma Rivers sat beside Madeline Hayes, her hands resting lightly on her growing belly. Derek Rivers entered with his usual confident stride, but the arrogance that had defined him for years seemed fragile under the weight of scrutiny. The proceedings began, and Madeline immediately established the gravity of the case. She presented hospital records documenting Emma's distress during her pregnancy, highlighting the moment Derek abandoned her at a critical time. Each page, each medical note, was delivered with precision, leaving no room for doubt about the emotional and physical risks he had imposed. Witnesses were called to the stand, including nurses and family friends, all providing consistent testimony about Derek's neglect, emotional abuse, and repeated patterns of irresponsibility. Their accounts painted a vivid picture of a husband who had failed in both duty and empathy, emphasizing the deliberate and ongoing nature of his behavior. Text messages and emails were introduced as evidence, demonstrating his evasiveness, dismissive responses, and attempts to manipulate Emma, reinforcing the narrative of a calculated pattern of neglect. Derek's defense team attempted to deflect, questioning the timing of Emma's claims and framing incidents as misunderstandings or miscommunications. But Madeline anticipated each move. She countered with detailed evidence, drawing connections between Derek's habitual neglect and the imminent danger posed to both Emma and their unborn child. Every objection, every feigned explanation, was dismantled methodically. As the proceedings continued, the power dynamic in the courtroom shifted decisively. Derek, once seemingly untouchable, grew visibly flustered, his confidence eroding under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Emma, on the other hand, remained composed, her strength and resilience evident to all in attendance. Her courage, combined with Madeline's strategic presentation, underscored the reversal of control. The man who had abandoned and manipulated now faced accountability in the most public and undeniable way. By the time closing arguments were made, it was clear that justice had taken a firm hold. Derek's defense had crumbled under scrutiny, and the courtroom, once a place of intimidation, had become a space where Emma's voice, integrity, and maternal instincts prevailed, cementing the decisive shift in power from him to her. News of the courtroom proceedings and Derek Rivers' negligence spread quickly, first through legal filings and then via local media outlets. Headlines highlighted the shocking abandonment of a pregnant wife at a hospital and the ensuing legal confrontation, painting Derek as irresponsible and callous. Colleagues, friends, and acquaintances who had once admired his charm and success began to view him through a harsher lens. His reputation, carefully cultivated over years, began to crumble under public scrutiny. Social circles whispered about his misconduct, and professional contacts reconsidered partnerships, wary of associating with someone now publicly exposed as neglectful and morally compromised. Meanwhile, Emma's courage and resilience garnered widespread sympathy. Public opinion rallied around her, praising her intelligence, composure, and determination to protect her unborn child. Social media and community forums buzzed with admiration for the way she had turned vulnerability into strength, working with her lawyer to ensure her rights and safety. Emma, once privately suffering, found herself supported by a network of people who recognized her plight and respected her actions. The emotional consequences for Derek were compounded by social fallout. Each conversation, each encounter with acquaintances, reminded him of the courtroom revelations and the stark contrast between his actions and Emma's dignity. Embarrassment and shame intertwined with his legal vulnerabilities, reinforcing the reality that his attempts at manipulation and avoidance had failed spectacularly. For Emma, the public attention was bittersweet. While the scrutiny highlighted her personal ordeal, it also validated her decisions and reinforced her newfound independence. She could feel a sense of empowerment as the world recognized her courage, a reinforcement that the protective measures she and Madeline had implemented were not only legally sound but morally justified. In the wake of Derek's collapse, the reversal of power was complete. His public image tarnished and his personal control stripped away, while Emma's strength and integrity emerged as undeniable and admired by all who witnessed the fallout. The final verdict arrived like a long-awaited release of tension, echoing through the courtroom as the judge delivered a ruling that would irrevocably change the lives of Emma and Derek Rivers. Every legal argument, every carefully documented piece of evidence, and every witness testimony presented by Madeline Hayes culminated in a decision that left no ambiguity. The court recognized Derek's abandonment, emotional neglect, and the potential endangerment of his pregnant wife, and ruled decisively in Emma's favor. The ruling ensured that Emma would receive full legal protection for herself and her unborn child. Custody provisions were established to guarantee the child's safety and well-being, with clear stipulations that Derek could not interfere without strict oversight. Financial measures were enforced to secure Emma's independence, including access to shared assets, support for medical and living expenses, and safeguards against any attempt at manipulation or coercion. These provisions provided not only practical security but also a symbolic acknowledgement of the gravity of Derek's misconduct. For Derek, the judgment was a sobering humiliation. The man who had believed his charm and social influence could shield him from accountability was publicly and legally humbled. The courtroom had exposed his neglect and irresponsibility, stripping away both the veneer of invincibility he had maintained and the confidence that had fueled his manipulative behavior. Socially, the judgment reinforced the damage already wrought to his reputation, leaving him to confront the consequences of his actions on both personal and professional fronts. Emma, in contrast, emerged empowered and vindicated. The ruling validated her courage, her foresight, and her insistence on protecting herself and her child. While the emotional scars of betrayal remained, they were tempered by the assurance of safety, stability, and justice. The court's decision not only secured her present and future but also underscored a profound truth. Accountability, courage, and resilience could overcome neglect and betrayal, and that justice, when pursued with intelligence and determination, would ultimately prevail. Months later, the soft cry of a newborn filled the quiet room, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Emma Rivers' life. She held her baby close, feeling the steady warmth and heartbeat of the child she had fought so fiercely to protect. The trials of the past months, the abandonment, the betrayal, the legal battles, felt distant yet profoundly transformative. Every tear shed, every fear confronted, and every courageous step taken had led her to this moment of pure, tangible hope. Emma reflected on her journey with a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced emotional devastation, isolation, and the uncertainty of a future shaped by someone else's reckless choices. Yet through it all, she had discovered a strength she had never fully acknowledged, an independence rooted in self-respect, resilience honed through adversity, and the empowerment that came from asserting her rights and safeguarding her child. The experience had redefined her sense of agency, showing her that courage was not simply enduring hardship but actively shaping one's own destiny. Derek Rivers' defeat was complete. Legally, socially, and personally, he had been held accountable for his actions, stripped of the influence and control he once wielded so recklessly. Emma no longer felt the weight of his absence or neglect as a threat. Instead, it became a testament to the consequences of betrayal and the power of steadfast resolve. As she looked down at her child, Emma felt a profound sense of purpose and possibility. The past could not be erased, but it had forged a new version of herself, confident, vigilant, and unafraid to claim what was rightfully hers. In this quiet, sunlit room, surrounded by the love and safety she had fought for, Emma embraced the promise of her new beginning, a life defined not by the failures of others but by her own strength, love, and unwavering determination to protect her family and future.